Okay, so I welcome everyone and thanks a lot for taking the time to listen to the webinar series we are doing with MaMMoS. MaMMoS is a new project that will work on multiscale modeling in magnetic modeling. And we have the great opportunity to look what is under the hood. So we will learn about best practices, what is it, what we're doing, what they are doing, and we will get to know a lot of the beneficiaries and the experts that make this project a success. So there will be a series of 5 webinars. You're very welcome to attend the other ones as they come along, and we hope you enjoy this. So we will introduce our speaker, Thomas Woodcock, who studied for a master's in material science and engineering in the University of Sheffield. He then moved on to the University of Birmingham, where he did his PhD in the School of Metallurgy and Materials. And then he moved all over to Dresden as a Marie Curie Fellow and did a few postdoctoral periods and started his own research group. And what a surprise, he's working on magnetic materials for the last 13 years. He specialized in particular researching rare earth-free permanent magnets. He does electron microscopy and is intrigued by the complex links between the microstructure and materials properties, and he does scientific programming with Python. And so what we do is we head over to Tom. Tom, the floor is yours. Please do entice us with the latest research you did with MaMMoS.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex, and good afternoon, everybody. I will just share my screen. I think you should be able to see my presentation now and hopefully also my pointer. So yeah, welcome everybody to this webinar. So for once, I'm not going to be talking about rare earth-free permanent magnets, but instead it's going to be about generating machine-readable workflow diagrams with a piece of software which we've been developing in the MaMMoS project recently, which is we're calling MODA Kit. I just wanted to start the presentation by giving a very brief overview of our project MaMMoS. So there's a lot of information on this slide, but let's just break it down. So this is the logo of the project, MaMMoS. It stands for Magnetic Multiscale Modeling Suite. And it's coordinated by Thomas Schreffel at the University of Continuing Education in Krems, and the other partners are the Max Planck Institute for Structure and Dynamics, Bosch, Siemens, and Institut also in association with the University of Grenoble-Alpes, Uppsala University, and IFW Dresden. And this diagram here gives an overview of the whole project. It's quite complicated, but at the top here, we basically have the atomistic levels. So we have modeling techniques like first principles calculations, spin dynamics, which are supported by experimental techniques which measure things like crystal structure and chemical composition. At the bottom here in the middle, we have the sort of mesoscopic scale with micromagnetic simulations, which are also supported by a variety of different characterization techniques. And then on the right-hand side here, we move all the way over to the macro scale, where we have finite element Maxwell solvers, which can even model electric motors, for example. So what you can see is that we have a number of different length scales here, and we have several different modeling techniques and several different characterization techniques, all of which generate a lot of data, and they have to be able to talk to each other. So in order to be able to try to bridge these scales, then we have AI error correction in these two gaps between the scales here. So what is very important to be able to do is to take all of the data which we're producing in the project and put it into a form so that everybody on all the different characterization and modeling techniques can understand what the data is, where it comes from, how it's been produced, and how they can use it in the future. So research data management is a very big part of the MaMMoS project, and that's really where this webinar came from. So if you'd like to know a bit more about the project, here's our project website. So I guess probably most people have heard something about research data management, and there are these words MODA and CHADA flying about now. So where does that come from? Well, MODA simply means modeling data, and CHADA is just characterization data. And this is an attempt to standardized documentation of modeling and characterization techniques. And the EMMC, who are hosting the webinar today, and also the EMCC, the European Materials Characterization Council, are two of the bodies who are leading that on a European level. And in my view, there are two most important elements to MODA and CHADA. And the first one is the standard forms. And so the idea is that there's a kind of a template of forms which we should fill out for each modeling or characterization technique to give scientists in the future, other people who are looking at our data, a clear idea about what is going on, what's been done, what's necessary to make it a good model or characterization. And the second aspect, which is very important, is a workflow diagram. And again, the idea is to show people in the future what was done and what is necessary to ensure the scientific quality. So let's have a look at a couple of examples of these workflow diagrams. So this is a CHADA workflow diagram example taken from this paper by Romanos et al. And what we can see here is that we have a lot of different elements here which are linked together and flow basically from top left down to the bottom right. And on the left-hand side here, we've got a kind of key. So all of these red elements here are the user case type, and the light blue is the method, and dark green is data acquisition, and the light green is data processing. So we have these kind of different types of elements, and they're all linked together, and there are various different levels of tests which have been done here in order to do this characterization technique. If we have a look at an example from MODA, so this is taken from the paper by Kolokathis et al., which is from this year. And the authors of this paper have been to some quite considerable lengths to try to make modeling data, MODA, more accessible and easier to do. So they have made some templates for the MODA tables and also for producing the MODA diagrams online. And you can fill in the data online and you're kind of guided through that process. And this is the kind of diagram which comes out, and you can see that there are a lot of similarities to the CHADA diagrams. We have different kinds of elements with different colors, which are all connected together, and they show the workflow during the process. So initially, both of these kind of diagrams, the CHADA diagrams and the MODA diagrams, were drawn by hand. So that means that it's quite a lot of effort to go through drawing all of these little circles and typing a text box inside and then drawing an arrow and all of this kind of thing. And so what we thought when we started the MaMMoS project was that it would be quite nice to have a way of drawing these diagrams which would be a bit easier, and that where you don't have to do all that kind of stuff yourself. So we started looking at a few different alternatives, and one of the things which came up fairly quickly is UML, which is Unified Modeling Language. And that's the language which you can use to produce a lot of different kinds of diagrams, and Plant UML is an open source implementation of that. And from the Plant UML website, it says that Plant UML is a highly versatile tool that facilitates the rapid and straightforward creation of a wide array of diagrams. So it's an open source software. It's various licensing options, including MIT. And because we're talking about research data management, trying to make things available for people in the future, it seemed to make sense to also talk about using an open source tool to also generate these diagrams. What you can also do with UML and Plant UML is to do things like add hyperlinks and advanced formatting. There are various different output formats, and the UML activity diagrams, which is the type of diagrams that we're going to use to describe workflows in MODA and CHADA, are very similar to something else which is called BPMN. This is Business Process Modeling and Notation. And recently there's been a suggestion that BPMN might be a suitable thing for these particularly CHADA diagrams. And the good news is that the UML activity diagrams are extremely similar to that. So that also shows us that Plant UML is a good way of basing or a good base to make these diagrams. So I would encourage people to have a look at the documentation for Plant UML and also for the Plant UML activity diagrams. So the software which we've developed is based entirely on Plant UML. Plant UML does all of the hard work, and we will see how that works a bit later. Okay, so what does MoCHADA do? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit of interference. I don't know if anybody has their microphone open. If you could please mute, then that would be great. Thank you.
Just muted.
Okay, so what I'd like to talk about next is what does MoCHADA do, and how can we use it to help us? So the description on our website says that it's Python code for generating MODA and CHADA workflow diagrams and tables based on plant UML with machine-readable enhanced design based on bespoke themes. So what that basically means is that Plant UML does all the work of making the diagrams, and MoCHADA gives us some extra themes and some helper functions written in Python, which are dedicated to MODA and CHADA. So they really help us to make exactly those things that we need for MODA and CHADA. So if you're interested in the software, the code is hosted on GitHub, and this is our MaMMoS project organization on GitHub. And I would also encourage people to have a look at the documentation page. So here's the website. You can also get to it from the code page. And there we've taken quite a lot of care to make step-by-step instructions of how to install the software, how to set it up. And everything I'm going to show you today is shown in the form of Jupyter notebooks on that website. So you can go through it step by step. Okay, so in this webinar, what I would like to do is look at a few different aspects. So the first thing is the word diagrams. Then I'd like to move on to the standard tables that we need for MODA and CHADA. And then something else which we haven't talked about yet, which is metadata diagrams. So usually for any characterization or modeling techniques, there's a large amount of metadata, which is just in the form of some tables. And Plant UML gives us an opportunity to present those tables in a very clear and easy to read way. And I think this is also quite an aspect, and we've got some helper functions in MoCHADA to help you make those diagrams. And then at the end, I'm going to show you an example of a data repository where we can bring all of those things together to guide future users through our data. Okay, so let's start by looking at the workflow diagrams for CHADA and MODA. So what do we want to do when we were thinking about making this MoCHADA kit? So the first thing that was really important is to try to get an automatic layout. So we didn't want to be drawing boxes and arrows by hand. We wanted it to be automatic. The second thing we need is to have the type of the element reflected in the color scheme, just like the color code, which I showed you from the CHADA diagram before. Ideally, we'd like to make it machine readable. So it's possible in the future that people will use kind of search algorithms to go through data repositories to see if the data is suitable for their uses. So it makes sense that if an AI algorithm can also pass one of these diagrams to learn how the experiment was done, that might be useful in the future. It would also be great to enrich the diagrams with hyperlinks and advanced formatting. And it would also be interesting to see if it's possible to somehow link workflows from CHADA and MODA together. So let's have a look and see how we can meet some of those aims. So first of all, I'm just starting with a plant UML activity diagram for CHADA elements. So what we need is these 5 different types of elements. So we need user case, we need experiment, raw data, data processing, and final data. And if you want to produce a diagram like that with plant UML, what you need to do is you need to write some commands in a text file. And these are the commands here which produce this diagram on the left-hand side. So you can see it's relatively simple. We have 7 lines of code. We start with @start UML, and we end with @end UML, and everything that's in between, these 5 lines in between, that's responsible for producing this diagram on the left-hand side. And in an activity diagram, what you do is you simply put everything between a colon and a semicolon, and anything that's between those 2 signs is the text, which will appear in this element here. And then on the next line, you write a different text. So this is, in this case, experiment. And then these 2 elements will simply be joined by an arrow in the final diagram. So you can see this is a very simple syntax. And if I go back to my aims, already aim number 1 has been met by plant UML. So we have automatic layout. I didn't have to draw any boxes or arrows. I just had to write those 7 lines of code and then run plant UML on that text file. So let's see how we can apply a color code to that. So this is where MoCHADA kit now comes in. Plant UML already has something called themes. So you can take a particular theme, which gives you different kind of color codes, and you can apply that to a diagram. And what we have done is to make some special themes for MODA and CHADA. And what you need to do is you need to define in your theme a stereotype for each type of element that you want to define. So in our case, we need 5 different stereotypes, and we need to give them 5 different colors. And the way that we do that is we add one extra line to the code, which is that one there. So you put exclamation mark theme to tell the program that it should use the theme when it's making the diagram. This is the name of the theme, CHADA Plasma, from, and this is the path to the folder where you have your themes. And apart from that, all of these lines start the same. So again, we have between a colon and a semicolon, we have the text that we want to appear in this element. And here comes the part at the end, which is tells the program to use the stereotype user case for this element and to use the stereotype experiment for the second element and so on. So anything which is in between 2 pairs of pointed brackets is called a stereotype. That stereotype is defined in the theme, and that's what tells Plant UML to color this node dark blue, this one purple, and so on. So again, if we go back to our aims, now we can see that the type of element is reflected in the color scheme. And also this is going some way to making it machine readable. So if we take this very simple text file for this diagram, then it would be very easy to imagine in the future that we could parse this text file simply by looking for these pairs of double pointed brackets and saying, okay, so this element has a user case type, and then anything between a colon and a semicolon is the text that we want to parse. So this makes these diagrams in some way machine readable. Just a couple of other words about themes. So the diagrams that I've shown you so far have been based on the plasma theme, which is based on the plasma color map from Matplotlib. And personally, I find that one quite nice to look at. But if we go back to the diagram which I showed you before, these are the colors from the current working agreement of CHADA and MODA. So it is also worth having another theme, and we made the CWA current working agreement theme for the CHADA kit so that you can also produce these diagrams using the same colors as is already in this current working agreement if you want to do that. There are also many other color schemes, and you can also make your own very easily if you want to do that. Okay, so let's move on and have a look at a few examples of these CHADA workflow diagrams. So this example, which I'm showing you here, is for an EBSD experiment in the SEM. So this electron backscatter diffraction. And at the top here, we have our user case element, which in this case, we are saying that it's a bulk sample or a thin film. Then we have a couple of experimental techniques elements, and then we have the raw data, and then gradually going down and data processing and some final data at the bottom. And you can see it's just completely linear from top to bottom. If you want to make it a bit more clear, what you could do is you could put all of those elements which correspond to a particular technique inside a box and give that a label. So here, this box is also defined inside the theme. So you can simply tell the program to use the theme for this box. And here, so we have our bulk sample, and now we're going into the box for SEM EBSD, and you can imagine how you could also have another box for a different technique, for example, magnetometry or thermal analysis at the side, so you can show how you use different techniques to analyze one sample, for example. A little bit more complicated is when you might have some parallel processing. So here, this is now a different type of box for a group of techniques, and we're looking at SEM with EBSD and EDX. And in this particular case, there's a certain amount of linear processing, and then we have a parallel part here where we're acquiring EBSD patterns and EDX spectra at the same time. And then we bring that data together to analyze the material further on like that. So it's also possible to make this kind of diagram. Again, if you want to make it even clearer, you could also put those separate bits in a technique box. So all of those elements which are from EBSD go in this box, and all of the elements for EDX go in this box. So I think this makes quite a clear diagram to show how this experiment has worked. If we want to start thinking about how we can combine CHADA and MODA, here's one possible example. And this probably looks a little bit small on the screen, but what I've done is I've taken the diagram from the previous slide at the top, and I've put it inside a dotted box here, which says CHADA. And then at the bottom, what we can see is that the output from the characterization technique now goes into the box which says MODA, and it becomes the input for the modeling technique. And here then I again split the processing. I've got two different modeling techniques, finite element micromagnetics and machine learning, and I get two different outputs from those. I combine them, and then I get my final output like that. And as I mentioned on the screen, this looks quite small, but if you were to open this file in a browser, you could actually scroll up and down and look at different parts and zoom in. So it's more like a kind of blueprint or something. And it is possible to imagine for the whole MaMMoS project to make a diagram like this for all of the different modeling techniques, and that really would be like a technical drawing size, which you would have to sort of zoom around on. It wouldn't be suitable for putting into a report really, but you could analyze the whole thing. Okay, so let's move on and start thinking about the tables that we need to do. So what aims did we have there? Well, the idea was to try to develop some helper functions in Python to help us produce tables which have hyperlinks between them, also a view of all the tables together and individual tables, and again also using this idea of automatic layout. The second aim was to be able to draw these tables from a single JSON or YAML file. The question is why do we want to do that? I mean, you can, of course, produce these tables with a word processor or with Tech or whatever you like, and that's a perfectly easy and perfectly valid way to do it. But if you do it in this way, that you have all of the information in a single JSON file, for example, that's a very simple text format, which again is very easy to parse. So maybe somebody in the future might come along and look at this JSON or YAML file, and it could be done with AI very quickly to get that data into a Python dictionary, for example. As I mentioned before, we wanted to have automatic layout, and we want to have the color scheme to match the workflow diagram. So let's just have a look at a couple of examples. So here I'm showing a title element here. So we've got 5 different tables. There's an overview table, user case, experiment, raw data, and data processing. And in this case, we're showing the table for the experiment, which is shown here. And again, you can see here the color scheme is the same as for our workflow diagrams. This diagram is also produced by Plant UML, and this is what's called a JSON diagram. So we start with a JSON input file, and it produces a diagram like this based on the levels of data which you have in that file. What you could also do is to produce single tables. So this is now not editable, but it's an image file. So you can simply produce an image of all of these tables and paste them into a report or on a website or whatever you like. Another option is to produce a diagram like this where you can have an overview of all the tables. And again, this looks quite small on the screen, but if you open it in your browser, you could scroll up and down and look at all of the tables individually. And there's also a possibility to put advanced formatting inside. So you can write equations here with LaTeX or with ASCII math. You can include images. You can code tables within elements of this larger table. There's various text formatting, and you can also include hyperlinks. So there's quite a lot of rich formatting going on there with the CHADA tables or MODA tables. Third topic that I want to talk about is metadata diagrams. Now, as I mentioned before, when we have data repositories, we might have a very large file, for example, an HDF5 file, which contains a lot of data, and there's a lot of metadata hidden in there sometimes under different nodes. And sometimes when you start coming to look at a repository, it's not always obvious where the metadata is or how to get to it. And these metadata diagrams might be one way of being able to present this kind of information more accessibly and in a very clear way. So again, what we wanted to do here was to write some Python functions to extract metadata from HDF5 and format it as a JSON. So again, we can use Plant UML to make these JSON diagrams which look very attractive. And then we can use these kind of diagrams to enrich the MODA and CHADA tables and workflows. Again, we want to make use of automatic layout, and this time we also want to add bespoke highlights, because often you have a huge table of metadata and there might only be one or two values which you really want to point out to a future user for emphasis. So let's have a look at a couple of examples. So this is some metadata from an eBSD experiment. And there are a couple of different levels. So this is the first set of eBSD data in the file. This is the eBSD data associated with that data set, and this is the header. And again, you can see a large table here, and this is most of the data is here. But for example, when we look at this entry here, which is for the phases, in this case, there's only one phase, but there might be 5, 6, or 7 phases in an eBSD map, which means that you've got one of these tables for each of the phases. So then you would see all of those. And what I've done in this case is to highlight a couple of values within that phase. So I really want to emphasize those particular metadata to somebody working in the future. Here's another example. This is metadata from an SEM image. So again, we've got different categories of data. We've got some general parameters, things to do with the SEM, things to do with the beam, scanning parameters, detector parameters, image, and the stage parameters. And again, you can see a lot of metadata there, and I've just highlighted a couple of things which I think there are important for use in the future. So this is how we can present metadata in the form of a JSON diagram, which is, I think, quite a clear and attractive way to present this data. All right, so let's move on. So I've shown you now the 3 different types of things that we can do with MaCHADA Kit, and I'd like to try to give an example of how we can bring this all together into a data repository. So I'm going to switch over now to, am I doing this right? To here. So hopefully now you can see my file explorer. So this is a data repository. And if we look in the data folder here, what we have is an HDF5 file which contains all of the data. We have a couple of images from the data. We have a script which we'll use to analyze the data. And if I go up, I've got my CHADA folder. And inside there, I've got my JSON file here, which contains the information for my CHADA tables. And if I just open that with my text editor, you can see there that this is the format of the file. So anything in purple here is a kind of category or title, and all of this text back here is the entries which we've got in those tables. And that's the JSON file which produces the CHADA tables. Then you can see here that we've got SVG diagrams for various different CHADA tables. We've got the CHADA workflow, a color key, some metadata diagrams, and I've also included a Jupyter notebook, which is how to make all of this CHADA data. So if I just go back up to the top node, there's also the README SVG here. So if I double click on that, it will open in the browser, and we can see straight away this is an eBSD dataset. It's from IFW Dresden. It's to do with the MaMMoS project, and we have a link here which is interactive overview. So if I click on this link, then it takes me straight away to the CHADA workflow diagram for the data which is in this repository. And if we have a look at the top, so this is our user case node here in dark blue, and you can see now it doesn't just say user case, it also gives examples of what type of sample it is, the sample number, and so on. And if I hover over this node, you see that we get a tooltip which says view user case CHADA table. And if I click on that, then I go straight to the CHADA table for that particular node. So that's the user case. I get more information about the composition, various other things. And now here on the left-hand side, I've got this title elements with the links in. So if I want to go, for example, to the raw data, I can simply just click there, and then I can see some more information about the raw data. Going down, then we see we have a technique box for eBSD. If I don't know much about eBSD, I can go here and it says view CHADA tables, and then I get a view of all of the CHADA tables for the eBSD technique. So I can have a look at all of that data. Here's a link because we analyzed it in MTech. So if I simply open that in a new tab, then I could have a look at this MTech's website. go back to the original diagram. And if we go down in here, we have one node here, which is experimental. It shows us what kind of geometry we set up. When we go down further, we're requiring the electron images. And here we've got, again, the possibility to view the metadata. So here is now my metadata diagram for the electron images in that data set. And we've highlighted a few important things there. If we go down further, this is a raw data node. And again, we can view the electron image. So if I click on that, it's a little bit dark, but here's one of the electron images which was acquired in that data set. Going further down, we could take a look at a different set of metadata. This is now for the EBSD experiment. And again, we can see that we had the tau phase in this particular case and some other things. And going right down to the bottom of the diagram, then we can click on this one and we see that this is the final orientation map, which was the final data of that EBSD experiment. And if I forget what color all of these nodes are, I can simply click here, View Color Key, and that takes me to another diagram, which tells me the type of elements that we've got there. So that is how you can, an example of how you can bring all these things together to into a data repository with the idea of guiding future scientists who might be interested in your work to see how it was done and how it was all put together. Okay, so just to wrap things up, I wanted to summarize a bit about MaCHADA Kit. What you can do with MaCHADA Kit is you can use the bespoke themes to help you produce machine-readable MODA and CHADA workflow diagrams based on plant UML. We have got helper functions which can help you to produce these tables in a variety of formats from a single JSON or YAML input file. We've got other helper functions which can help you to read data from HDF5 files and produce these JSON diagrams to show people what's important about the metadata in an easily readable way. So compared to doing all this by hand, I think you can save a lot of time, and I think the diagrams also look very good. In terms of disadvantages, everything is based on plant UML, so you do need to put some effort into learning the plant UML syntax. But having said that, it is relatively simple. There are lots of good examples, there's good documentation and an active discussion board, so you can always ask questions if you get stuck. And another possible disadvantage is that the diagrams can become too large just for one figure in a report or a scientific paper. As you see, when you have it open in the browser, then you can scroll around and you can look at different parts of the diagram. But if you want to have a very compact diagram, then you would have to design it in that way so you're not including too much information in the diagram in one go. So I'd just like to finish by acknowledging funding from the EU for the MaMMoS project, and I'd also like to acknowledge the other contributors to the MaCHADA kit. That's Swapnil and Andrea and Hans from the Max Planck Institute for the Structure and Dynamics of Matter. And thank you all very much for your attention. I hope this has been useful, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Bye.